Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Jonny,
And I'm Phil.
and in today's very special episode, we've had a few of them recently, but in this special episode, we've got another big release from Warlord on the horizon, which is the Armies of Great Britain. We can finally talk about it, what's inside of it, what we think of the new rules, so a bit of a spoiler there, and some of the new units you might find in there.
So big thank you to Osprey and Warlord Games for sending us both the PDF and also the physical book. As with the other armies of Germany and the United States, it's a great book. Really nice photos in there, really nice maps, images, stuff from Osprey's historical series and so on. And some really nice actually framed and posed photographs of the models in action. So yeah, lovely quality book, first of all.
Yeah, I like they seem to have got it down now, haven't they? Like in terms of what a bolt action book looks like, and having that big Osprey library to lean on, alongside the sort of the studio photography,
Yeah.
is as really we seem to be in a new era of quality, effectively.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree. So yeah, yeah.
But I imagine a lot of people who are tuning in to hear what the book contains in terms of the rules, not just the fantastic imagery. So, shall we jump in and start talking about the rules?
Yeah, do you want to kick us off, Johnny, with V2's national special rules, and then we can look at where V3 is with regards to those?
Absolutely, it'd be my pleasure. So, V2, we had a few national characteristics. We had bombardment, where when you're rolling for a prep bombardment, instead of rolling one dice, you roll two and then you pick the best result, which was a nice little perk, increased your chance of getting that six on like an enemy officer team. We then had the artillery support, which is the rule that meant you saw forward artillery observers basically, whereas you rarely saw them in other armies, where effectively you got a free observer. And so there's absolutely no reason not to have that. And then we had the thing that was most unique to the British Army book, which is that you then got to choose your last characteristic in order to represent sort of like the wide variety of forces you'd find in Britain and the Commonwealth. And so you had, I'm not going to go into the details on all of them, but you had up and atom, so you could charge your people. You had blood curdle and charge, so that you could charge them without getting shot. You had tough as boots, which is where you got bonus attacks in combat. You had rapid fire, where you get bonus shots. And then you had vengeance, which was my personal favorite, where if you were close enough to the enemy within 12 inches on a 4-up, you'd lose a pin before you took your test. And so I like that you could theme your force in V2.
Yeah, I think that was one of the sort of big, key points of the Brits in V1 and V2 was that depending on how you wanted to play it, you could pick a special characteristic, national characteristic to suit you. So, like you said, if you were playing, up close and personal, you might take something like Vengeance because you want to clear pins in order to activate and so on. If you had a very assault heavy force, you might be taking something like Up and Atom or Blood Curdling Charge. If you were leaning into, lots and lots of riflemen, you would take rapid fire. So, yeah, that was definitely a feature of the British in V1 and V2. You could channel it and change it depending upon how you wanted to build your force and what you wanted to play.
Yeah. And British were very well represented in V2 and
Yeah.
always did at least reasonably well at tournaments, if not very well. And so it'll be interesting to see what's happened in V3. So, Phil, do you want to open that nice new book you've got and tell us what they're getting in V3, please?
Yeah, so I was going to say it's all changed. It's not all changed, but it is certainly mostly changed. So you do still have the artillery support special rule. However, you have to pay for it now. So there's no longer a free observer. And what you also get is the opportunity to roll twice on the barrage table when you roll and you pick the highest result. So if you're rolling to see what effect comes in from your artillery or your smoke, you roll twice and pick the highest. So it's a similar rule, but you're not getting that free observer anymore.
Yeah, it's like they've combined the two rules there. It's like you've combined your bombardment and artillery support rule into one where you're not getting the free one, but the one that you've paid for is better. It's more likely to come in when you want it. And so I'm not convinced it's going to get people to take observers, if I'm honest, unless we happen to see a huge synergy later in the book.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, it's different to say like the US Air Observer where you can shoot it twice. For example. So there is a subtle difference there. It's worth noting that the prep bombardment double roll is gone, so that no longer exists in V3. Next one you've got is fixed bayonets. So this is effectively the tough as old boots rule, but it's now a constant. So it's not a question of choosing it from five options. It's a constant. So for this one, then, for every three models, irrespective of what armament they carry in your unit involved in close quarters, you may add an additional die when rolling to damage. These attacks are assumed to come from any of the models in the unit. For example, four models would add one additional die. Now, to preempt some questions, I that's literally what it says. So that's the wording. I don't imagine this includes assaulting vehicles, and I'm basing that on what we saw with the Polish Lancers in the FAQ recently. So that certainly has been a question of whether or not this would include when you tank assault. There's no reason in the wording to say that it wouldn't, but I strongly suspect that we will find early doors that isn't the case.
Yeah, that's because actually the wording is interesting because it says add an additional die when rolling to damage. Because I think with the Polish Lancers, it's you roll an additional die when rolling. I can't remember exactly what the wording is, but it was less because you do roll the damage to the tank, which is why I can't see people thinking that needs an FAQ immediately.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because the wording is wrong, but just to clarify, that's
Yeah.
not for tanks.
Yeah. The other thing that is interesting as well is that you can allocate these extra dice to any model. So questions already have been asked in terms of if you've got an SMG guy, so your NCA, for example, has got an SMG, and you've got 8 or 9 rifle guys, you've got extra hits there. Can you allocate it to the guy with the SMG? Yep, rules is written, you can.
Yeah, which makes like a single SMG a bit of a force multiplier there.
Yeah.
Take 10 regulars and one SMG, and
Yeah.
suddenly you've got like 4 tough fighters effectively.
Yeah.
I wasn't that impressed with this when I first saw it because obviously, like, as a blanket statement, combat's not that good in V3.
Hmm.
However, I actually, since I've been thinking about it more and more mulling it over, I'm thinking this is so powerful because now that combat is so bad,
Hmm.
there's very few units that'll be able to roll over you when you can fix bayonets. And
Yeah.
so just having that as like a passive income effectively, that every time you get charged, you're slightly more likely to win the combat when combat's already so precarious. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I can see this being used in one of one or two ways or both ways, to be honest, in a game. One is as a unit that's sitting on an objective with, one or two SMGs, decent number of guys in it. They're going to be difficult to shift. You're going to have to, HE them off effectively or flamethrower them off because if they're going to go down from indirect HE, that's going to help halve shots. You're not going to want to, charge into them and so on. The other thing I can see them being effective, like you say, is because not many units are very good in close assaults anymore. Actually, if you've got a fairly chunky and hardy British section charging at you, yes, you're going to take some casualties because it's going to be at best simultaneous and at worst into a defended position. But if you're re-rolling but misses because of tough fighter and you've got those extra dice, statistically you're going to do all right.
It's such a shame that fixed weapons can't charge anymore because some British mortars charging in, medium and heavy mortars, could really make mincemeat of some small squads,
Yeah.
snipers who get too close.
Yeah. I used to enjoy when I was playing sort of commandos in V2. The commandos had a special rule in the campaign, but where, you could arm your weapons teams, your mortars and MGs and so on with SMGs, and just charge at people. And certainly one or two opponents who know who they are and listen to the pod have been on the receiving end of that once or twice.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. I love using mortars for not indirect fire.
Yeah.
The next rule, Phil, I'm very curious to see what your thoughts are on it because I have feelings.
So this is Come On Lads. So this is a brand new one for V3. With great professionalism and unflappable stiff upper lip, British officers led from the front, often putting themselves in positions of extreme danger. British officers' morale bonus is increased by 1, but any cover save they might receive is reduced by 1.
Yeah, this would be called, they couldn't hit an elephant at this range if we were playing American Civil War,
Okay.
which is of course the famous last words before you get
Yeah.
taken out.
Yeah.
My feelings. Do you want to go first with what you think about it before I?
Yeah. So, your single inexperienced officer taken as a tax, you're going to need to keep him out of the way and so on. There's two ways around that. One is you increase the size of the squad, which obviously we've seen from Armies of Germany and Armies of US. You can do that now with your officer teams. The other one is you stick your officer inside an open top transport. You don't care about the negative to the cover save because you're inside a transport and it's about the transport's cover. You're increasing that morale bonus. It's going to be really difficult to stop people activating when you've got +3 for a platoon commander, +5 for a company commander, sat inside a brain carrier or a half track or an LVT scout car, whatever it is.
Yeah, my thoughts on this are similar, but the thing for me is this was a great rule for V2, is my thoughts, because in V2, that was a good trade because you really need that extra morale boost because you had less officers and it felt the amount of failed order tests in V2 felt huge compared to what I see happening now. In V3, because everyone's got a 2+ anyway, your regulars often are passing on like an 8, even with lots of pins on. It's not that good a perk having the +1. I think if the morale bonus was still 1, making it a 2 is a huge boon. 2 to 3 doesn't feel that good anymore, especially because of the I would rather have him the original way, where he's got the better cover and a +2 morale. The other thought I have, well, actually, I'll let you jump in there if you wanted to.
As you're saying that, I'm just thinking that if that rule was in V2, that would be very, very powerful. The Brits were good enough in V2. If you had that rule in V2, that almost would have made them not quite an auto take, but pretty close to an auto take if you were looking at things from a competitive standpoint.
Yeah, and then my other reflection, which is more sort of like lawyery, for want of a better word, but the wording here, I think this might generate another FAQ because it says the British officers' morale and cover. It doesn't say the British officers' unit. And so, I can see people reading this as, well, his unit gets the cover save, but when he's on his own, he hasn't got the cover save. Do you see what I mean?
I do. I think that is stretching it a little bit too far. And only in the sense that, we don't differentiate between a model of one type singular gets this, but when it's more than one, it's different.
We do, not often for shooting at, but I mean, we do because we have the NCOs can be removed separately. They have separate weapons upgrades. We used to in V2 with small team bonus, that used to be a thing where depending on the size of the squad, you'd have different hitting. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I just think if people are going to misread the tough as all boots, fixed bayonets it's called now, in the same way against vehicles, because it's not explicit, I could see people saying, because it doesn't say the squad, well, the majority of the unit still has the normal cover save. It's only the officer who's got the reduced cover save. And so you take it on the majority. I don't know. It's just one of those things that I noticed, and I thought that's a bit of a quirky wording that it's exclusively the officer.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from. I think that is, I would be, I don't know what the word is, but if somebody questioned that or tried to do that, if I was playing them, I'd be like, really? Come on.
Yeah. As I said, I'm not a big fan of this rule. I think I'm not convinced British players will be big fans of this rule either, to be honest. I'm very curious to see once this gets out into the wild and people start playing it in earnest. I'm very curious to see if that +1 morale makes much of a difference to most people's games compared to they lost the officer because he was shot off the objective when he would have been on a 2+ save, but because of his stiff upper lip, the idiot stood up and got hit on a 3+.
Yeah, well, don't take them on their own. Something actually that is worth questioning is, does this apply to command vehicles? So does this apply to your command vehicle in a armored platoon? So the wording is British officers, and I know that command vehicles are the equivalent of a platoon commander, but that's possibly something which would come up at some point, because an armored vehicle getting platoon commander giving a command vehicle given a +2 in an armored platoon, that is slightly more significant than just a single +1 that you currently get for an armored platoon.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. The 1 to 2. I couldn't agree more, Phil. It's so much more significant. And you're absolutely right, actually. And I think the thing that both of us have raised there would have been resolved with like just a slightly more explicit language of like the officer and his men. And then that way it's really clear it doesn't apply to tanks. There is one more national characteristic, but I'm still coming to terms with this. Are what we're seeing now national characteristics, or are they unit special rules? Because they're not national characteristics because they don't apply to everyone in the army. So they are unit special rules that can be applied to certain units within a nation, is how I would describe this section.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're calling them national characteristics because that was what they were called in V2 and V1. In the book they're called Army Special Rules, but yeah, whatever they are, what they allow you to do, very well, not very similar, in the same way as defend the fatherland and for air, land, and sea for the Germans and the Brits. The Germans and the US.
Quelle surprise.
What you can now do is make your non-specialist units specialist. So what you have for the Brits are guards, commandos, airborne, and chindits. We'll do them in that order. So the guards rule represents the renowned guards regiments, but can also be used for other storied regiments with a strong sense of regimental tradition dating back hundreds of years. What this means is that if you want to make a non-guard unit a guard unit, and to do so, it needs to have the for kin and country special rule and also to be relevant to guards. You must take them as regular or veteran, and they must be given the following rule for +1 point per man. So this is the Iron Discipline rule. Any regular or veteran unit may remove 2 pin markers rather than the usual 1 if an order test is passed.
Excellent rule. Because having said the officer's morale bonus wasn't that great, so you would think removing pins wouldn't be that great. It could make the difference in your shooting. And so actually, if you're sitting on 2 pins, you pass a test because you've got your brave officer. This is really good.
Yeah, depending on what units you can make into guards, I think this is an amazing rule when you synergize it with certain things. So I'm thinking, we'll see later, but if you can take engineers as guards, for example, you're taking, I know flamethrowers are not as good as they used to be, but they are still all right. You've got to take that pin every time you fire a flamethrower. But if you then pass it, because you're also getting buffed by the officer who's nearby in an open top transport, which is armored, and you're clearing 2 pins, not only are you almost, not guaranteed, but you're more likely to pass with the buff from the officer. You're also getting rid of those pins that you've taken from firing your flamethrower, plus any incoming shots. So that was when I saw this. That was my immediate thought was, depending on what units can become guards, you're keeping them going. They are activating, they're moving forward, and if they're taking 4 pins, well, it's only a single -1 if you've got any number of pins nowadays. It doesn't matter if it's 4 pins or 1 pin, etc. So I think the guards rule is very, very strong. I think
the other thing that's really useful for as well is if you are camping that objective and you don't want to get pinned out, but you want to maybe put them on ambush every turn, you don't want to be doing that rally. You're just losing pins constantly, which is really nice. You're removing that risk of getting pinned out. So big fan of that. Yep. And also very different to what we've seen so far. I mean, not compared to historic rules, but compared to the other national characteristics, very different.
Absolutely, yeah. Something that isn't different is the airborne one, but that's absolutely fine. So airborne units must be taken as veteran, and they must be upgraded to stubborn for +1. You can also equip them with wheel bikes if you really want to.
Nice and new.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get much use out of them, but if you want to go thematic, I think it's good.
Yeah, but the standard, I want to make my, MNG, mortar, etc., airborne because I want to do a full airborne platoon. You can do that now. That's cool. Commandos, units must be taken as veteran. You have to pay an extra 3 points per man. SMGs only cost you 3 points, though, because for that extra 3 points per men, they all become tough fighters. So that's where you get the reduction of the cost of the SMG. They get behind enemy lines, which is that they ignore the -1 modifier to order test when outflanking. They get independent, which is this appeared in appeared in the D-Day British and Canadian book when the Commando Selector came out. Independent special rule: if a Commando subsection loses its NCO, roll a die. On a roll of 3 or more, another model within the unit is immediately selected to act as the unit's NCO. On a roll of 1 or 2, the NCO has died as normal. Commando machine gun teams, mortar teams, anti-tank teams, flamethrower teams can fire any small arms they carry if the team is not firing the main weapon. So that's kind of what we were talking about a bit earlier, where it was quite nice to have these weapons teams that could do, not just fire their MMG. And then Commando HQ teams, machine gun teams, mortar teams, anti-tank teams, sniper teams, and flamethrower teams may be given the Who Dares Wins rule for +2 points per model to represent SAS units. So that's going to cost you 5 points to make something an SAS model, because you've got to take it up to a commando for +3, and then take it up to SAS for +5. But if you want to run your LRDG trucks and so on with your SAS guys in North Africa, you can do that. If you want to do Rogue Heroes Series 2 in Italy, you can do that as well. So yeah.
And just to be clear, while we're talking about the rules, because this annoyed me that they haven't put what that means where they've referenced it for the first time in the book. Who Dares Wins is basically fanatic, but to the very last man. And so it's good. But as you said, 5 points is a lot of points. And going through them, tough fight is good. Behind enemy lines, I don't think it's that good because it's rarely used, because normally you want your commandos pushing up the table rather than sneaking around the outside. Independent, it's okay. Like we've talked about how much morale isn't as important anymore now that you've got such brave officers.
It's also
mhm.
that with it's only snipers, isn't it, that are taking out NCAs,
Yeah.
and we're not seeing snipers very often. So
For that reason, yeah, because that's all they can take out. And so it's not much to write home about. The next rule where they're saying they can shoot the other weapons, that's just true. Like that's not a special rule because the US can give their snipers submachine guns. And so if we're saying that they can't fire those submachine guns because they don't have the special rule, then why am I paying to give them American submachine guns? So that's just a universal rule that if you're not firing your team weapon, you can fire your other weapons.
yeah, but things like machine gun teams and mortar teams and anti-tank teams don't have small arms.
Yeah, generally they don't, and so that's what is the nice part. It's not that they can fire them, like it's that they might have access to them, and actually making that the rule where they get a pistol. Do you know what I mean? Like everyone gets a pistol, or everyone gets a rifle or a carbine or something. That would have been a nicer thing, I think. But I guess when we get to the teams, we'll see if that's been
Yeah.
factored in.
Yeah.
And then Fanatic's good, but you've already 3 points deep for one rule, really. Like realistically, of all those rules, it's unless I can have lots of tasty weapons on like my machine gunners, loaders. I think I'm only paying for the tough fighters for my commandos, so I'm paying 5 points for tough fighter fanatics.
But it's nice and themey, if you want to,
Yeah.
like I say, Rogue Heroes is really popular. If you do want to run a full North Africa LRDG SAS list, or Sicily or late war Northwest Europe, you can do, which is cool. I think it's good.
Yeah. It's nice to have it included. I just think that I would have maybe like fiddled with it a little bit just because I've always thought the points were a bit high for commandos, even in V2.
Okay.
And then we've got a famously British rule next, haven't we?
We got the Chindits, yeah. And so when I saw this when they revealed it, I was like, awesome, because like if you've listened to the pod for a while, I've got an affinity to Burma. My great uncle was a Chindit. I played Brits in V2. I had a Burma army. So yeah, this is cool. You can take Chindits. Units must be taken as veteran, and you pay 3 points, and you get behind enemy lines. Same rules as the commandos. You get ambush tactics. When deployed on a table, these units may start the game on ambush. And you get fieldcraft, which interestingly applies to light howitzers and light anti-tank guns too, but not to other artillery units. So they're kind of like Gerbishjägers, basically.
Yeah, really good. I actually really like this. It'll depend what weapons they've got to see if the ambush is worth it, but I mean, I still think you're overpaying for behind enemy lines because it's a rule that doesn't work with the other rule, because if I'm behind enemy lines thing, I'm not ambushing.
Not ambushing.
And so
yeah.
so I shouldn't be paying for both of them. It should be a 2 points upgrade in my opinion. But I like that they've got fieldcraft. That's the main thing, because I think fieldcraft is really powerful now with like sticky objectives and stuff. My only question, I think we should probably address the elephant in the room.
Yes.
Which is that my understanding was from all the Warlord announcements is that we've got the Armies of Great Britain, which is what we are now beautifully narrating. I hope you agree. And all of the Commonwealth has been split into a separate book entirely. So I guess my question is, where in the British Isles did the Chindits come from?
So I was super excited to see that the Chindits was a special rule because I thought, amazing, I can take a full Chindit force, which is British troops, depending on if it's Operation Thursday or Longcloth. It's also going to, well, they're both going to have Indian troops, including Nepalese, so Gurkhas, and potentially African troops as well. But I can't because those Commonwealth units, so the Indians, the Nepalese, and the Africans, are not in the Great Britain book. And I was quite, grumpy about this, as you will remember when I first talked to you about it, purely because I really did actually want to genuinely run a Chindit column, and to do so, then I wanted to have the Gurkhas because the first Chindit operation was basically 50% British, 50% Indian division, and then the second operation you had the Africans supporting as well. I really wanted to be able to do that. I know I can't do that because obviously this is not the Commonwealth book. I'm hoping when the Commonwealth book comes out in 2026 that I'll be able to use the Chindit special rule from the Armies of GB, but drop in and incorporate the Gurkhas and the Indians. The Gurkhas and the Africans and the Indians, to be fair. What's really interesting, if you look at the Bolt Action Compendium, and I have promised it, and I will at some point do a short review on the pod about this, there's a whole chunk of missions all about the Chindits. And it's very clear in that bit where you take Gurkhas alongside regulars, and also which is representing the Indian troops, and also alongside the veteran British Chindits. So yeah, to answer your question, where in the British Isles did the Chindits come from? A lot of them came from sort of Yorkshire, Liverpool sort of area, and so on. But it was regiment. It was effectively volunteers from those regiments that then formed a special force, which then got trained up by Ord Wingate alongside Indians, Nepalese, and then potentially Africans later on as well. They were a composite force rather than being a British regiment. There you go.
Yeah.
I've said my piece.
The thing that, without jumping on sort of any like where stuff is from, etc., and like should it be here, should it not be here? The part to me that is a bit peculiar is if we're saying like, oh well, we'll wait till the Commonwealth book comes out. That'll allow us to build the force we want by tying the two books together. So you'll be able to use the two books together. Why have the two books if they're always going to be used together? Would be my thought. Why not just do one big fat tome?
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see what the Commonwealth book says with regards to mixing, the Commonwealth, because they said there's 6 nations in the Commonwealth. And this is about Armies of GB, so I don't want to go too much on about the Commonwealth. They said there's going to be 6 nations in the Commonwealth.
Hashtag subscribe though.
Hashtag
for when that does
subscribe.
come out.
And certainly later on in the war, a lot of the engagements were with some units from some of the Commonwealth nations alongside some British regiments and British units. So then I would expect, I was going to say need, but I would expect there is going to be a meshing together. Why not have one big book? It's a lot of work. It's like double the amount. I don't know.
Yeah. I do wonder if that was part of it, like the urgency that Britain's always been such a popular force. We wanted to be one of the lead books. And so we're going to reduce our workload to ensure that it does get out quickly. But the other side of the coin is if it would have been better, I think it would have been worth waiting the extra 6 months and putting it 2 releases behind. But as you say, it's not about Commonwealth. So I suggest I quickly skirt past the quartermaster's stores. I'll quickly just window shop. I won't dive too deep in. And then we'll move into the units properly. So you got Little John adapters, which is nice, increases the penetration of your light anti-tank gun. But if you roll a 1 to hit, you break the gun. You then have your well bikes, which you've already discussed. It's bicycles, 1 point a man. Vickers K gun gets an extra shot. So it's 5 shots for infantry, 3 for vehicles. And then you get demo charges, which, again, we're not going to linger on because I think these have appeared in the last 2 Armies of books. Yeah. And so if you're not familiar with how they work, look at the screen now or open Armies of Germany or Armies of USA. Anything you want to handle in the quartermaster store before we move past it?
No, it's all good. Yeah.
Let's move to the British officer then.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we'll do them all together because they're all very similar. So the HQ units, you get your officer, you get your medic, you get your chaplain, you get your forward observer. Okay, so it's very, very much standard to what we've seen so far. With regards to the British officer, and actually with regards to all of them have the king and country rule, so all of them can be made into into to special units if you so choose. You can increase the size of the officer squad. So initially, it's a maximum of up to 5 men with rifles. If you take them as commandos, you can add even more. So you can actually go up to an extra 7 men. So you can create an 8-man commando squad. And if you take commando or airborne officers, you can give them AT grenades. So you can have a really like thematic commando or airborne force where you're not taking any vehicles with them, but you've just got a load of AT grenades in your squads, and they're all charging towards vehicles trying to blow them up with AT grenades.
Yeah, 8-man commando officers are quite a cool little thing. Quite pricey, like you're adding a lot of points there. But if you're doing thematic commando raids, very nice.
Yeah.
Anything else in the HQ that's worth really highlighting? Because I think it is fairly generic now. Like once you've described the army rules, it's the same old HQ choices that we're seeing coming up time and again, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I'll call out the artillery, well, the forward observer, because you can, if you take them as commandos, add up to 5 additional men. And the reason for calling this out is if you only take 1 rifle platoon, you make them commandos, you can take an 8-man officer squad, you can take a 6-man forward observer squad, and then you've also got your 4 your 2 compulsory and your 2 optional sections. So you could actually make, say, with 2 platoons, a rifle platoon and a heavy weapons platoon, you could make a decent amount of troops, boots on the ground, using just 1 rifle platoon.
Yeah, even just 1 rifle platoon, you've got sort of like 6 big squads. And that's all your dice because you've paid 3 points a man for commandos.
It would be expensive, but it would be cool and thematic. I used to play commandos in V2, and I used to use that selector in from V2, and I would do that. I'd have enlarged officer teams and all that kind of stuff. Maybe have a centaur with them if I was going D-Day, but it was basically just a load of commandos. Yeah.
So moving into infantry squads and teams, we've got our old friend, the rifle section. Nothing to really note here for me, other than the fact that they can only be guards.
Yes, they can only be guards because there will be separate entries for commandos, Jindits, and airborne. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So, but they've got the general choices like NCO's the only man with an SMG. They get 1 LMG, AT grenades. Then you've got an old favorite of mine, and I think probably for most listeners, which is the home guard section.
Yeah. Home guard. So 5 men, 35 points in experience. So 7 man with rifles, up to 5 extra men unarmed at 5 points each. We'll come back to that unarmed bit. If you want to give them rifles, if they're unarmed, it's +2 points. You want to give them shotguns, it's +4. Pistol +1, and you can give your NCO an SMG. 1 man can have an LMG. If you don't take an LMG, 1 man can have a BAR, and they can be given anti-tank grenades. So
you do have to replace your rifle with a BAR, to be clear. So you can't, because I was thinking that's actually a good price for a BAR if it's 5 + 6, but no, you've got to.
Yes, yeah. So you do need to have a look at the wording. Sometimes it's in addition, sometimes it will be replaced. Yeah, they are green. What's interesting here is that it's been confirmed that unarmed men can fight in close combat. We've already mentioned the rule about extra dice for bodies, and currently the extra dice can go to any man. So you take a home guard unit, give the NCO an SMG, max out with another 5 unarmed men, and you've got yes, they're inexperienced, yes, they're green, but you drop them onto an objective, and you might shoot them off, but you're not going to assault them off.
No, I disagree though on one element, which is the premise is good, but don't give it to the officer because he can be sniped. So don't give it to the NCO, rather, not the officer. Give a shotgun to an unarmed man because he can't be sniped, which means that you can keep funneling those extra attacks through him. Whereas if you give it to the NCO, he'll get sniped off potentially.
Even more whackery than what I just said, but yeah. Yeah.
When in Rome.
Yeah. So home guard is your source of cheap, inexperienced officers, inexperienced men. You can take inexperienced rifle sections, but if you want to really, make them cheap, you can do that with the home guard because of the unarmed men.
Yeah, and they're just brilliant thematically as well. Like everyone loves the home guard. Moving forward, though, we've gone the opposite end of the spectrum. So we've gone from the most inexperienced to possibly one of the most veteran, which is the airborne section. As you'd expect, they're stubborn and they've got LZ signals, not LZ signals, because we're in Britain now.
US, yeah.
And so basically, if you start with them on the table, then friendly paratroopers get to reroll to come on from reserve. Their options are interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So the thing I really like about them, so you can have 5 SMGs, you can give one a light machine gun. What I really like is that up to one man may have a light mortar. So similar to like the Grenadier squads with the Japanese, you can embed a light mortar into this unit.
I'm not sure the light motors are worth it, you know. Like I've seen them hitting the table a lot recently. I'm just not convinced.
Early doors when I was sort of playing V3 when it first came out, and I was playing a guy who was playing Japanese, and I was getting fed up of just getting peppered by IJA Grenadier squads with 3 light mortars in them. I'm also thinking thematically, I've got a full airborne British airborne army, and I just love the idea of taking one rifle platoon. And then just stacking out all these extra options, dropping in light mortars all over the place, and that kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a nice thematic choice, definitely.
yeah.
Air landing rifle section. So you
Worth
can make them
worth
stubborn.
noting. It's worth noting, yeah, that you can take regular stubborn troops, which again is something I've done already in V3. With the US in the main rulebook, you could take regular stubborn Marines, for example, and I enjoy doing that. Got a lot of mileage out of that. So yeah, if you want to take your glider troops, if you're playing a Pegasus Bridge scenario, these air landing rifle sections are representative of the Ox and Bucks light infantry as an example. So that's quite cool. Regular stubborn troops.
Yeah, slightly few options, couple of SMGs, LMG, AT grenade stubborn. So, and also less men as well, a maximum squad size of 8 for them, which makes them less of sort of like a charge into combat, more sort of objective holder, I would say.
Yeah, and they
Um,
they they start at 4 men as well. So the airborne starts at 5. So if you want to take, if you want to go for like an MSU build, for example, you can take little 4-man veteran squads of air landing stubborn guys.
yeah, 56 points for veterans. And then let's call it 60 because I'll give one bloke an SMG. And then we've got the aforementioned Chindits.
Yep, absolutely fine. Yep, 2 SMGs, one LMG, and they've got the rules we mentioned already.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, are they making use of their rules? Like, are they going to get the use out of behind enemy lines, start in ambush, fieldcraft with the weapons loadout they have?
I, th- I think you could. So if you built a proper Chindit, column, so no vehicles, anyone sat there thinking I'm going to put some tanks on my Chindits, please don't. You might have some units deployed, starting on the board, for example, in ambush, and then you might have some of the units coming on the outflank, to represent sort of the encirclement and so on. A couple of SMGs in the squads that are on the outflank to give you like tough fighters, etc., up close and personal, and then the ones who are deployed in ambush, give them the LMG and they're just putting out pins, from the start of the game.
Yeah, my worry with them is just that, like, from a games perspective, purely, not from a thematic perspective. I think they're fine from that perspective. But like both roles, they don't hit hard enough to justify like the special rule costs. Like the ambush with an LMG isn't going to hit very hard when it hits in turn one. The outflank or the charge with fieldcraft with 2 SMGs with the smaller squad size, because you've got expensive men, isn't going to hit as hard as something else, perhaps. And so I'm on the fence about whether, like, if you're looking for good units from a competitive perspective, this is
Mm.
one for you. But I think thematically, I don't have a huge problem with them. I think they're about right.
I think 5 men, so what's that? 80 points, a couple of SMGs at 4.2, so 88 points gets you a 5-man veteran squad with fieldcraft. That could be quite tasty for things like key positions, because you don't get access to scouts in the British book. Spoiler alert: there are no scouts, so you're not getting those little forward deploying, infiltrating units like you do for the Germany and Soviets and so on. So this could be a way of getting, a small unit into a position early doors, running on turn one, using fieldcraft, going down on an objective from turn two, etc., with your double SMGs.
Yeah, I don't want to linger too long on the Chindits, but it does. What the role you've described there is how I use my US Rangers with 3 SMGs. The 5 men set you back 82 points or something, so they're cheaper, and you've got more of the SMG. So when you are doing the shooting, and so it's quite a comparable role of sort of like running towards the enemy, and so that's why I'm kind of on the fence about them. But I'll be interested to see if someone leaning into them and seeing where they go with those rules, because there's probably some shenanigans or fun to be had with it.
Yeah. Next two, you got commando subsection, and then you've got the Royal Naval Commando subsection. There's subtle differences in terms of the number of men you can take and so on. So the commando subsection, these start as 4 men as veterans. They are 16 points each. You can take an additional 8, so you're going up to 12 there. In terms of loadouts, any man can replace their rifle with an SMG. So if you really wanted a 12-man veteran behind enemy lines commando unit, you can do that. You can add up to 2 LMGs. You can make the LMGs Vickers, which gives them an additional shot. You can give them anti-tank grenades, and you can give them a bicycle. What is sort of unique about them is that you may add a commando second lieutenant for plus 30 points. This adds only a single officer model. It doesn't give you even more options to add more men, nor does it fulfill the requirement of a platoon commander to lead the platoon. What this represents is that quite often in commando troops, you would have 2 to 3 officers in a troop. You'd have that your primary officer would be your platoon commander, and then the other officers would drop in and lead some of the commando sections, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. Now, there is one thing that needs to come up in the FAQ, I think, which is the question of normally a platoon commander can't snap another officer of any type. Because you now have an officer in that squad, there is potential that actually rules as written, you now can't snap to this squad.
Yeah, so it says in the entry, it clarifies what they can do. So they represent the first or second lieutenant who leads the men directly. It's an officer model. It follows the rules of a platoon commander. So that would suggest to me that you couldn't snap that unit too, because they are following the rules of a platoon commander, and one platoon commander can't snap to another platoon commander. That platoon commander, so that officer that you've just dropped into the commando section, only has a +1 morale bonus rather than a +2, and may themselves only snap to one other unit instead of 2. One of the bonuses, or another bonus, is that if the NCO dies and the officer's still alive, you ignore the effects of losing the NCO. I'm a bit torn by this in the sense of if I want to go super themey and I've made my commando troop and I've got additional officers, so I drop 1 or 2 into commando subsections. What I can't then do is using my actual platoon commander currently, unless they clarify it. What I can't do is snap to those 2 commando subsections that I've paid the additional points for to embed additional officers into them, which seems a bit weird. I get it because you get the whole chain snap to chain. Sorry, chain snap to. That's what I'm trying to say. Rearrange the words and they make sense. You can't do the whole chain snap to thing, but it's like, yeah, but I want to be super themey and drop in another platoon officer.
Yeah, I think it needs FAQs or errated because I agree. You should. I see no problem with you snapping these 2 because otherwise you're punishing players for going thematic, paying extra points because now you've made an snappable squad. Equally, the risk of the chain doesn't exist because you can't snap to with an officer who has been snapped to. So, like if your company commander snaps to a platoon commander, that platoon commander then doesn't get to use his snap to. So it's not like there's a risk of that. I actually think I think it just needs a quick errata to just quickly say that it can still be snap toed, but obviously in better language than that.
Yeah. Or it can't, and actually that is just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want it that way because even though I'm never going to play Commandos, I just don't think it's a good mechanic to make people pay for something that then is a detriment to them.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, we got the Royal Naval Commando subsection, very similar to the Commando subsection we just talked about. Differences being the squad size. So these start with 5 rather than 4. Generally speaking, the loadouts are pretty similar. You can only take 3 SMGs rather than the whole squad. You can only have 1 LMG. You can take AT rifles. What is interesting, they get all the normal rules of commandos, including the additional officer. What I do like is the securing the beaches special rule. So Royal Navy Commando subsections count as engineers when attempting to clear underwater mines. And if a Royal Navy Commando subsection is on the table with a rally order, any attempt to bring on reserves via boat, landing craft, or amphibious vehicle ignores the normal -1 modifier. So if you're playing a really themey D-Day assault scenario. You've got some Royal Navy Commando subsections on the table. You need to give them a rally order because it's effectively saying that they're focused on bringing in the airborne, so not the airborne, the amphibious transports, and you can ignore that normal -1 modifier from reserve. It's pretty cool.
It's very cool, especially because it doesn't state you have to be on the water. And so obviously for the landing crafts and stuff, that's implicit. But I could take some LVTs, some nice little buffaloes, load them out with my full army effectively, and then use that to not get the -1 to come on like I was an American player. So actually, this, even though we're saying on a D-Day scenario, you can get use out of this even in a normal game.
Well, yeah, it does say they need to be on the table.
Yeah, so you put your Royal Navy Commando section on the table, give
Oh
them a
yeah,
rally,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then your LVT comes steaming
Yeah,
in from the
yeah, yeah.
outflank.
That's yeah.
Amazing.
That's exactly yeah.
The other thing that I noticed as well is no Vicar Ks here. So I don't
No,
know. You can't do that 2 Vicars, 10 shots from one squad
no.
thing with them. But equally, you're already 80 points deep for them. So you
Yeah.
probably don't want to be putting another 40 points on them anyway. Especially if you're the first turn you're going to do a rally.
Yes. The final sort of commando one is the commando motorcycle detachment.
Yes.
These are awesome. So three men for 63 points. You can add up to 6. So I could have nine Harley Davidson commando guys, all of whom may have submachine guns, and they get the normal commando rules. I just think they're cool.
My only complaint with them is the fact that they're on motorbikes and the motorbike rules are terrible. Other than that, brilliant. I imagine there might be some shenanigans you can pull with, like, not huge, I guess. Behind enemy lines is quite a nice tie into the motorbikes for late game objective capping, but at 21 points a model, it's a
Yeah,
bit rich.
there's some serious like MSU type builds you could do with the Brits. Just looking at this initial size of the units. Now I know obviously you're paying for motorbikes here, but 4-man commando units. The next one, SAS infantry section, 4 men. There's definitely something there.
Yeah, the motorbikes, not to, what is it, to flog a dead horse. The fact that you've got tough fighting motorbikes, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be, because I never used them, but I believe you can't charge while you're on your motorbike, and
No,
so
you have to dismount. Yeah,
you have to dismount. So effectively, your tough fighter and your motorbike are fighting for who has priority. You can't shoot your SMG from your motorbike. You can't shoot your rifles.
yeah.
You're using them purely just to rush stuff like objectives.
And look cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
most importantly.
yeah. SAS. This is our final sort of like special forces bit here. Your SAS section, four men, 68 points veterans, pistols and rifles, add up to 4 men. Any man may have an SMG, up to 2 LMGs. You can upgrade them to Vickers, give them AT grenades, and they can take demo charges. And they get all the commando special rules, plus they get the Who Dares Wins rules.
I'm confused with these from a points perspective because it's a 5 points upgrade because you've got all the perks of a commando plus fanatic having, well, Who Dares Wins. So it's a 5 points upgrade. A veteran is 13 points basic, which means you should be at 18 points plus they've given them pistols, so actually 19 points a man. But we're actually only paying 17 points a man. And so I don't really understand where my 2 points have gone missing. Have they lost something from the commandos rules that I've missed that they've lost, if you know what I mean?
No. The SAS they have all the commando rules, and in addition they have Who Dares Wins.
Is Who Dares Wins an option, or is everyone has it, don't they?
It's baked in. Yeah, it's baked in.
So it looks to me like they haven't paid for Who Dares Wins effectively because they've got veteran 13, commando 16, a pistol 17, Who Dares Wins, free upgrade.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point. Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand why they've got pistols, to be honest, though, equally. While we're on, like, literally, what is the point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing it's super themey, and they all carry their sidearms as well as their own small arms. But...
Yeah, the problem for me is the fact that they made it a dud weapon in the game. Because if it still give tough fighter, then it's really cool that they've got it. But yeah, bit of a bargain there for you. So I'm going to take SAS over Commandos because similar sort of vibes. I'll do a slightly different theme, but same sort of vibes, but at a better points cost.
Yeah, because of the fanatics. Yeah. Okay. The last two. So you get the core of military police section, which we've seen these in the Armies of Germany and also the armies of US, the equivalent ones for them. These are 4 men, inexperienced. The reason why you take them is traffic direction. So if a British force includes a Court of Military Police section in reserve, it does not suffer the -1 penalty for attempting to bring vehicles onto the table. And also the get back in the fight. If any British unit fails an attempt to rally, it can immediately roll a second attempt if within 6 inches of a Court of Military Police. And if you really want to, you can take them on motorbikes, Johnny.
Yeah, if you're doing your Hell's Angels already, like lean in and go whole hog into it. I like these a lot. So actually, I'm going to forget the Royal Marine Commandos to bring my LVTs on, and I'm going to take these so that the non-amphibious stuff can also come on easier. And so I'm going to save the Commandos for D-Day and use my MPs once I'm ashore.
Fair enough. And your final one is the engineer section. So Royal Engineers. So these are inexperienced, regular, or veterans. Interesting, inexperienced engineers. 5 men. They're costing you obviously 11 points regular, so 8, 11, or 14. You can only have 1 SMG, so gone are the days of having a little, 5-man engineer section with SMGs and flamethrowers. But yeah, NCO can have an SMG, 1 can have a light machine gun, 1 can have a flamethrower. They can have AT grenades. You can give one of them a demo charge. All 4 King and Country options are available, so you can make Commando Engineers, Airborne Engineers, Guards Engineers, and Chindit Engineers. Circle back to my point about Guard Engineers. You can actually, if you take them as Commando Engineers, you can give more of them SMGs, and likewise as well as Airborne.
Oh, that's interesting, actually, because what I was thinking is if I take them as Commandos, I don't need the SMGs because then they're all tough fighter.
They're tough fighters.
So
yeah,
actually, it's interesting that actually the option, I don't need it when they're already Commandos. The other one that springs to mind for me is cheeky little Fieldcraft flamethrower there.
Yes,
Would be quite
yeah,
nice
yeah,
with the
yeah.
Chindits. If you're doing full foot slogs,
Yeah,
having Fieldcraft for your flamethrowers is going to make all the difference.
yeah. Especially, yeah. I mean, I know it's a short range, but you're outflanking Chindit Engineers. You're basically coming onto the table because you're rolling as a veteran, ignoring the -1. Your opponent's not going to put their vehicles close to the edge because you're going to be running through ground and then hitting them the second time, second turn you're on the table. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
going to use them during setup behind ruins and stuff.
Yeah.
In the same way, because now you don't want to come within 18 inches of the back of that ruin, because then I'm just going to rush through at the end of the turn and hose you at the start of next turn. And so actually, if we're avoiding vehicles, which we were sort of lamenting the move to tank wars, and so actually this could be a good way for you to sort of like fight those urges.
Yeah, and that's it for the sort of infantry sections. There's, it's not a huge amount, but everything's there. You've got your basic rifle squad, you've got your engineers, you've got your specialists in terms of commandos, airborne, Chindits, SAS, and you can customize them with the King and Country.
Indeed, yeah. Should we move into weapons teams?
Yeah, I'm not going to go through all of them because they're very, very familiar. So you've got your MMG, but you don't have your HMG. You get your boys anti-tank rifle. I'll skip the next one and come back to it to talk about it a bit longer. You've got your PAT anti-tank team. You've got a sniper team. You've got a flamethrower team. You've got a light mortar. You've got a medium mortar. And you've got a heavy mortar.
And all of them get all of the kings and countries, and also the option to add SMGs per man for 5 points each, which makes them all a little bit tasty. It's a shame that a lot of them can't charge, like the fixed ones, but as a defensive weapon, when you get within the minimum range of the medium mortar, very nice little addition for a lot of points.
Gets expensive because you got to take your mortar team, then veteran, then commandos, then +5 points for SMGs. Super themey, but does get expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. To be clear, that's an 8 points upgrade per man on top of the fact they're already veterans. So
exactly. Yeah.
But thematically cool.
Yeah. The one I skipped over just to talk about is the Blacker Bombard, and I love this. So it was effectively an early sort of a development of the Spigot mortar. It's kind of like an anti-tank weapon. Well, it is an anti-tank team, but it's also a bit like a direct firing HE because that's what it is. It's a little bit home guardy and a little bit basic, but it's definitely worth looking at. So it's regular 40 points for 3 men. It's a team weapon. It is fixed. The Blacker Bombard itself, it has a range 24. It's direct firing. It fires HE, and it's a 2-inch template. They're pretty cool. You can't take them for King and Country because they weren't being used by the airborne commandos, Chindits, or guards. But they're definitely quite cool. They look like very Dad's army as well.
Yeah, they're very cool. For any Soviet players, they're basically an Ampule Lamette, but without the set you on fire roll, because they're firing HE instead of basically Molotovs in a sphere. But yeah, very cool. And I don't think we see it enough, the Blacker Bombard. And I think it's because 24 inches and fixed is a bad combination generally.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's
your loss.
That's your lot. But I'm not sure if you need much more. Like, okay, you don't get infiltrators and scouts and that sort of thing, and you don't get maybe as much individual named units in the way that in Armies of Germany you did. But through the King and Country rule, you can kind of customize, your rifle guys as you want, your engineers as you want. You've got your military police.
Yeah. Before I jump back to something in the infantry sections section, I just want to quickly add an amendment to what I said about the team weapons being able to King and Country. Your heavy mortar is one exception where he can only be guards or Chindits and can't have SMGs. And so that is a slight limitation that if you are going full commando, obviously they weren't really sneaking in with heavy mortars. And so but obviously anyone who's just listening to us in audio format, that's something to be aware of. The other thing I wanted to address, which is another little bit of an elephant in the room, because I've said it before about the US, is it's such a shame that the Piats never found their way into the commando squads where they would have been during the war. Because they wouldn't have taken a Piat team, would they? One of the squad would have been carrying the Piat. And so it would have been really nice for that to be, I think a Piat's a 20 points upgrade because it's 40 points with 2 regulars. And so for 20 points for one of your commandos to carry a Piat would have been such a nice inclusion.
We might see something like that in the Armies of Commonwealth. So the Canadians in V2 had that little Piat team, didn't it, where you could take a squad of 4 Piats in. But it's we talked about it with the whole bazookas in Ranger squads in the Armies of US episode.
Yeah, and putting marksmen in squads as well, especially since snipers have really gone away. I think a 20 points upgrade to make a man a marksman and his buddy a loader would be a really nice touch for these sort of elite units that would have used marksmen as part of the squad. But having said all that, shall we look at what big guns we've got?
Yeah, so we'll do the artillery. It's pretty straightforward. You get light, medium, and heavy, all of whom may add a spotter. They all have a gun shield. You can take your light artillery as guards, airborne, or Chindits. If you take them as airborne, you need to drop the gun shield, which basically makes it into a pack howitzer. As we know from Brits from V1 and V2, the light howitzer has that 25-pounder AT shell, so it's a dual-purpose weapon in that it can fire either as a light howitzer or as a light AT gun. And we also know from the FAQ that when it fires as a light AT gun, you get that +1 to hit when firing at vehicles. I think what's interesting is actually the way it's worded is that you can take an airborne pack howitzer but use it as a light AT 25-pounder shell, which I'm not quite sure that was how they used them, but
I was going to raise exactly that point because I'm pretty certain in V2 we had this exact thing where if you went the thematic route, you didn't get the AT shells because they weren't using them that way.
Yeah.
And then that was one of the things that stood out to me. That rules is written. I think that pack howitzer is actually able to fire as an AT gun.
Yeah, because I know in V2, when you had the pack howitzer for both the US and the Brits, with the airborne or with other units, they didn't have that AT option. But,
yeah, and I think the 25-pounder is I was going to say the best, but it might be one of the ones that I think is the only good light howitzer now, because light howitzers have really suffered with the extended minimum range and the reduced pins, but being able to fire as AT as well is huge. And actually having 4 of them would be phenomenal. Having a proper platoon supported with some hardy infantry would be incredible. The one other detriment to the light howitzers, which actually I don't think we've talked about much at all really on the pod, is the change to gun shield. Now, recently I've been noticing it more and more where I'm like, actually, gun shields are rubbish because instead of making you hardier to wound, it's now a cover save, but it's not a cover modifier like
Yeah.
with down. And I actually think it should be a cover modifier because otherwise you put that gun shield behind a hedge, you've just got soft cover twice, which doesn't mean anything. You're still at the same 5+ save. And so I wish the gun shield was a cover modifier just because, again, it's just one other little thing that's going against the howitzers at the minute.
Mm. I guess on the flip side, if it was a cover modifier rather than, alternative, you deploy from the start, in fixed positions, a light howitzer with a gun shield
In
with an
hardcover.
in hard cover in a ruin. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this. That
Yeah.
that's not shifting unless you start indirecting it.
Yeah. Well, because actually, my wish listing there was based on what I knew they wanted to do, which is to really push people in the cover save direction. I actually think the real rule was just to leave it because actually the extra protection rule that it originally had, where you're one worse to wound, I think was a nice rule. And I think it worked. It would have worked perfectly with all the other games mechanics in V3. And so actually reverting to that might be a nice way to give howitzers a little bit of a boost. But please don't do it in the short term because actually I'd quite like to fix.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep the core mechanics pretty stable for a little bit.
Fair dues. The last one is the land mattress. So the
Yes.
British get a multi-launcher, late war only. So any of you cheesy guys running, mid-war 8th Army North Africa. Oh, and I've just happened to have a land mattress. Stop that now. But yeah, you get your land mattress
And it's finally not in a little box where you're not sure if it's
if
flavor
it
text
counts.
or
Yeah.
rules, and you get instructions of how you can use it. It's brilliant. I mean, 60 points as well. I think that's the going rate. Oh no, I think that's 5 points cheaper because you got one fewer men than the Americans who are 65 points regular, I believe. Pretty good. And spotters are back on the table.
Yeah.
So that forward artillery observer who has a benefit to his thing also gets to spot for this at the same time. Um, Quite a nice synergy. I don't think many people are going to do that because I don't think many people are going to take FAOs, but great to see a land mattress in the army book.
Yes. Yeah. Late war only though. Right, your anti-tank guns, you've got your light, medium, and super heavy. So you've got your 2-pounder, your 6-pounder, and your 17-pounder. Couple of things that, well, your 2-pounder for king and country, you can take it as a guard or a chindit. So you can have a light AT gun on a rotating platform, which gives it a 360-degree arc fire with fieldcraft.
And that is huge, by the way, because, well, the fieldcraft's also huge because you can finally move through rough ground. So you can deploy it in rough, get out of dodge when you get too many pins. But also, it means you can fire it on a fire order, which means you retain that +1 to hit. Like, as the tank's trying to whiz past you, you're like, not a problem, I'm still +1 to hit. So that's actually really powerful.
Yeah. Sorry, I was pausing because I was just scrolling back up to see if the 25-pounder had it, but it didn't. The 6-pounder, this doesn't get the rotating platform. You can take this as guards, airborne, or chindits. If you take it as a airborne, it had a special carriage that allowed them to be towed as if they were light anti-tank guns. So if you want to go fully thematic with your air landing platoon and an airborne platoon, with your jeeps, you can start towing some 6-pounders around with your jeep.
Which is very cool. I like that a lot. Interestingly, did we stop using 2-pounders later in the war? Is that why you only get them for the guards and the chindits?
Well, they're pretty obsolete because they weren't very
Yeah.
later on they weren't very effective, but they were absolutely fine in Burma, which is why the Chindits used them 44, 45 because the Japanese vehicles are not as heavily armored.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you got the big guns, 17
Yeah,
pounder.
17-pounder. So this is actually we'll pause on this a little bit longer. So super heavy anti-tank gun. You can take it as guards or airborne. The bit that's kind of just worth looking at is it's a super heavy anti-tank gun. It has 5-man crews. It's going to be pretty difficult to knock out. It's only 100 points regular. And the reason why it's quite cheap compared to other super heavy anti-tank guns is it's rather than having a 3-inch HE template, which is what you'd normally get with your super heavy, it's only got a 1-inch. Now you might be thinking, oh, I kind of want the 3-inch, but actually 100 points for a super heavy anti-tank gun with 5 crew if you're going to have, static fixed anti-tank guns, this is quite a good shout.
I believe that a German super heavy anti-tank is about 140, so you're saving 40 points, I think. Which, yeah, I guess it's worth it maybe, but counterpoint, it's an absolute indirect target, isn't it? Because you're going to have to keep something behind it to get it out of dodge, because you can't be pushing that about the table, can you?
No, it is a indirect target, but if you put another artillery piece within 12 inches, such as your light, I don't know, medium house, for example, indirect firing, and just recrew, you've got 5 men. It's going to take you a while to get rid of those 5 men.
Yeah, it's more the pins I'm worried about, like taking the -1 to hit, etc., and maybe failing the test. I don't know, it's interesting. Because also
Mm.
if the other crew's job is just to recrew, you're not getting much
Yeah,
use out of
no, no,
them.
no, no, true.
Uh,
But you take it as guards, so you shed 2 pins every time you pass, and you hide your little 2-man inexperienced officer who's giving you a +3 bonus. So you're passing, you're not being shot at, so you don't worry about the cover save because he's hidden behind, dense terrain, and you're also shedding 2 pins because you're a guards.
yeah, I'm still not convinced. I think
Yeah,
it's scary to face, but I'm
yeah.
as an offensive weapon, I'm not that.
No,
I
yeah.
worry I'm just going to lose it to indirect turn two. Do you know what I mean? Like they're going to get that lucky 6 turn one with the 3-inch template. Turn two, they'll mop it up.
And you choose not to go down, then it's just odds of law that they roll a 6, and yeah,
Of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
AA guns, which actually the
Yeah,
British were always pretty good at having, for want of a
yeah,
better
yeah.
word.
Yeah, and they're all here. You got your light, you got your heavy, both of which are on a rotating platform. Your lights you can take as guards, airborne, or chindit. Your heavy you can take as guards, airborne, or chindits. If you really want to, with your light autocannon, you could take it as a quad. So it comes as 35 points as a single light autocannon. You can add up to 3 for extra 30 points per gun. If you want to make it a quad, up to 4 autocannons, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, theme question wise,
Yeah.
are the airborne like was that a thing that the airborne had access to, the quad? Because it seems a bit excessive for the airborne units to be using the quad, but equally, I don't know. They could have been manning stations, but it just feels like a bit much to be dropping in.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly dropped in, the single ones because
Yeah.
it's the Polston, and there's Warlord have that airborne Polston AA gun model. Did the airborne use up to quad? I don't know.
Tell you what, if anyone knows, pop it in the comments because I genuinely am interested to know. Because even the 40 mil Bofors, I was a bit surprised that the airborne were dropping them in because that's you're starting to get a bit bigger.
I
Um,
imagine, yeah. I mean, that's very much a glider landing, isn't it? In terms of you secure the landing zone, you secure the perimeter, get settled, blah blah blah. The following day, 2 days later, in comes the heavier weapons.
yeah, that makes sense. And then we have a similar sort of idea. So, strap in for another couple of minutes of conversation about is a weapon worth it. So, what have we got here, Phil?
It's a 3.7-inch quick firing dual purpose AA-AT gun. There's 100 points from regular, 6 men, one heavy anti-tank gun on a rotating platform. It may fire as flak, but it has the improvised role. So the 3.7-inch gun is not really designed to engage ground targets. Each time it shoots against a ground target, it receives 1 pin marker to represent both the mechanical strain on the gun and its crew.
It's a shame it can't be gods from a games mechanics perspective. Obviously, they didn't have them, so realistically, not a shame. I think that might be all right, you know.
My first response was why, just why. But okay, go on.
The
You can
rotating
be
platforms, what's selling it for me again from the
heavy
idea
heavy
that
AT gun, rotating platform, counts
you're
as
always
flak.
getting that
Yeah,
plus. Because also, remember, in ambush, you're fixed to that arc. So this is a
yeah, yeah,
great
yeah,
one for
yeah.
putting one on each flank, put them in ambush, or even one in the middle. Doesn't matter which side the enemy come from. You've got both sides covered because of the platform.
Okay, so you're paying 100 points for a super heavy 17-pounder, not on a rotating platform with 5 men, or you're paying 100 points for a heavy anti-tank gun on a rotating platform, 6 men, not five, but taking an additional pin.
And 2 additional points. 2-inch template rather than one is in favor of the AA gun,
Yeah.
which is nice. And if some mad lad does happen to bring an air observer, you have something to counter it with.
Yeah.
And so actually, I think two of these is a better choice than the 17 pounder.
Yeah, okay. You've convinced me. Not necessarily to take it, but to certainly look at it.
That it's
So, yeah.
better than the 17 pounder at least. And that is all of our artillery, isn't it? Unless I missed one.
No, that's all our artillery. So we now are going to jump into vehicles and transports.
So, should we talk tanks then, Phil?
Go for it.
Jumping in, you've got an India pattern Mark II HMG, first HMG in the force, I think, 70 points. Fancy it, armored car?
It's quite similar to sort of the Japanese light tankets and so on. So you get your turret mounted MG and coax MMG, but it's different in that. So I'm thinking like the Type 92 tankette, which has got the hull and the turret. No, I don't fancy it. It's a short answer.
Fair enough, good answer. For the same 70 points, you can have two MMGs on a Vickers 6-ton. And that's our double nipple tank, isn't it?
The Vickers 6-ton is, yeah.
Yeah. Or you can replace the two nips with a single light AT with a
Or
coax.
you also get your light autocannon version as well, which a lot of people have been taking so far. It's quite a nice little one.
Then, Phil, we have a Tetrarch, which I think it's a nice tank. I believe, were these used with the airborne, the Tetrarchs?
Yeah, not in the huge numbers at all, but they were used, and I'm already thinking of my super themey airborne army now. Yeah, the Tetrarch's pretty cool. 105 points, regular turret mounted light AT gun with a coax MMG is only 7 plus. You can replace it with a light howitzer, and you can also add the Little John adapter, which I wouldn't recommend doing for 10 points. It's a shame it's a coax MG rather than a hull mounted, but most importantly, it looks cool. I love the
Yeah.
Skyhawk. It's really cool.
Especially if you're doing an airborne force. Like that's why I brought that up because I think it is the perfect cool tank to go with it. I think I would do the Little John adapter because I think that +1 pen could because then basically it's rear armor of a Sherman. You're really like almost guaranteed to go through then. Put them in outflank. I think that'd be quite cool. And then the ride in like the Riders of Rohan mid battle, just as the airborne are getting bogged down. Yeah, that'd be cool. Then we got our cruiser tanks next, haven't we?
Yes, every cruiser tank you could possibly imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they're basically like all the ones we've seen before. I didn't spot nothing caught my eye as a fancy one, so I think all your old favorites are there. I must admit, I'm not much of a cruiser myself, like so
So
I've not really ran one before.
yeah, the one I will shout out is the Cromwell. So this is obviously a late war version because it's got the fast rule. So you're getting for 220 points, a little bit expensive, but it is 9 plus armor. It's got a medium AT gun with a coax MG, one hull mounted forward facing MG. It's got the fast rule. You can replace the 75. I think that's a typo in that first sentence because I think
No, it's you lose the coax. So for 15 points, you can strip the
okay.
coax basically. But you're right, they've worded it in a really weird way where you can replace the medium anti-tank gun with a medium
With a medium
anti-tank gun.
anti-tank gun. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'd do that. I'd strip 15 points off. So for 205 points, I would get rid of the coax. I'd have a 9 plus medium AT gun, so you can still fire HE, and it's improved HE, so it's a 2-inch template with a hole and with fast.
I also think as well, sorry, that the reason you got confused there is because it is wrongly written. Because actually, it doesn't say what I said it says. It says replace a 75 mil gun with a medium anti-tank gun. You're not replacing
You're losing the improved HE.
Oh, you're
Okay.
losing the. So you actually keep your coax, but you lose the improved HE.
Okay, ignore that. Take it at 220, armor 9, 2-inch HE, also with your medium AT with a coax, but it's got the fast rule.
Do you know, because they're both D2 pins and that's what I'm shooting my HE4 primarily, I'm thinking I'll take it at under 200 points with a 1-inch template because it's fast as well. So you can get it point blank. Oh, but then counterpoint, if you're getting point blank, there's no benefit of going down. Oh, so maybe it's worth the extra inch.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. It's it's one of the few with the fast rule.
Yeah.
And being armor 9 as well. Most of the fast tanks we've seen so far are armor 7 or armor 8.
Yeah. And then before we leave the cruiser section, the one that everyone used to always run, the one that I used to see all the time, the double AA one.
is in the AA section.
So he hasn't come up yet. I was wondering where he'd gotten to because obviously we've got the lovely pictures of all the tanks that look exactly like him, and I'm just waiting for him to come up. But that's exactly why.
Yeah, so
So
the Crusader is there as the cruiser with the AT guns. The AA version appears later. Yeah.
yeah, and while we are still cruising,
hmm
how do you feel about comets?
I mean, they're expensive. What, 258 points regular for a turret-mounted super heavy AT gun with coax MMG, forward-facing hull-mounted MMG, 9+, but with reinforced front armor. So it's sort of it's what's a Panther armed with?
A
It's
Panther
Panther's
has
going to be a
the
heavy.
298 super heavy AT gun, coax hull.
Okay, so it is a super heavy. Yeah, I think the Comet's all the cruisers. Yeah, the cruiser tail Comet. It's all right.
Does that
It,
mean the
it's
Comet is the same as a Panther but cheaper? Have I missed
uh,
something there?
it's what 9+, super heavy AT gun, coax, forward facing, hull mounted MG. It'll be the HE difference because it's got 1 inch, not 3 inch template HE.
Oh, does the Comet only have the 1 incher?
Yeah, Comet's it's basically got the 16-pounder in it, hasn't it? Which we talked about earlier, which has got that reduced HE size.
Do you know what? I'm taking that because it's not like you can fire both anyway, is it?
No, no.
Um,
Yeah, it's if you like big tanks, yeah, it's pretty good.
yeah, I'm definitely taking that over a Panther every day of the week. And 258, I think I can justify that because people are going to be running scared from that. One word of warning though, doesn't protect you against dogs, that reinforced front. So watch out. Maybe keep some sausages in the back to distract them. Um, Anything else in the cruiser section before we move forward that caught your eye?
No, not in cruisers. No, now we're moving to Matildas and Valentines. They
Love a
are,
Matilda.
yeah, as expected. You can't take a flamethrower Matilda.
The
Which,
frog's gone.
well, you used to be able to. Certainly, the Aussies used to take it, didn't they? I don't know whether or not did the Brits have access to it as well.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's where it snuck off to the. We'll find a frog in the Commonwealth book.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, Matildas and Valentines, as expected. Your Churchills, they're all there. Every permutation of Churchill you can think of.
Can I just quickly highlight one Matilda? I know we're going through the vehicles because there's thousands of them, but the 120 points HMG turret Matilda, 9+ slow. That's basically everything you need to know about it.
Mhm.
I actually think that's an interesting choice because 120 points for armor 9, and you've still got something that can pin enemy armor, is actually pretty decent if you're going to build like a platoon of them and just use them as well in their traditional role as infantry tanks where you infantry march behind them.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. If you're building a Beth for Expeditionary Force BF, that'd be cool. Yeah.
So before we leave the Churchills, Phil, can we talk about the AVRE and its special
Mm.
rule, the old petard mortar, which
hmm
again, do you know what this is? It's just a bigger, blacker bombard. It's
Yes.
just another spigot mortar, which means that because it's a spigot mortar, the round doesn't go as far. So we're treating the range as half
Yes.
for both direct and indirect. This suffers the same wording we've had for a long time. Like we've been calling this out a long time because if you half your indirect range, you're within your minimum range.
Oh, so I see what you mean. So what you're saying is if you half the maximum distance of your indirect, it actually brings it under the minimum.
Yeah, and we highlighted this previously. I think this has come up at least 2 or 3 times on the pod, where because in V2 Brits it was worded the same, where it didn't tell you what happens to the minimum range, which means that rules as written, you cannot fire this weapon indirect.
So V1 V2, the petard mortar cannot fire at long range was the wording. So okay. So if this is saying you halve the normal range for both direct and indirect, does that mean you halve both the minimum range and also the maximums?
No, I would say the range is the maximum distance you can fire. That's what the word range means. The minimum range means the minimum distance you can fire. And so I actually think they need to explicitly state you half the minimum range.
Mm.
And as I say, like a lot of people have asked this questions a lot of times. So I'm surprised it didn't make the cut for the edit.
Yeah, it's interesting that the wording has changed, but it's still perhaps, well, not perhaps, it's still not exactly precisely clear what they are getting at.
Yeah, to be fair, it's a heavy howitzer, which means its range is 42 to 84. So if we don't half them in a range, you can fire it at exactly 42 inches. So as long as the opponent is not more than 42 inches and not less than 42 inches, you're absolutely onto a winner there. But I think in the short term, until we get the errata for this, I think the FAQ answer will be that you also half the minimum range. So it's a 24-inch minimum range, and the reason that I wanted to stop on it, not just to highlight the fact that the wording's not great, but actually, because the minimum ranges are so high for howitzers now, making it 24-inch would make it attractive because it's one of the few things that can lob something that big,
Yeah.
that close.
Over a short distance. Yeah.
And it makes sense thematically for what you're using them for, like
Yeah.
hitting the bunkers over the troops on the beaches.
Yeah, bunker busters, yeah.
Then we get fan favorite, the crocodile. I mean, I don't know if it's a fan favorite, it's my favorite. Because it's absurd by all metrics, it's absurd. It's a stupid amount of points, 425 regular, but I think you take it veteran to avoid pins because it's an 11 plus tank. So 510 points, 11 plus. You've got a medium tank gun with a coax MMG and a hull flamethrower. But you also have a trailer because the Churchill's not big enough. You've stuck your fuel in a trailer, which has the added benefit that you don't get the additional damage on the damage table because you've got fuel inside. And the other reason it's ridiculous is you've got a flamethrower on a really slow, lumbering vehicle. So I think this is brilliant. I don't know if it's brilliant for winning games, but it's certainly brilliant for having fun.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, yes.
And the 6 turns while you're slowly lumbering towards them, not using your flamethrower, you do have improved HE as well. So you get a 2-inch template. So that's something. That's all my Churchill banter. You got any more Churchill banter?
No more Churchill banter, so we're going to move into Lend-Lease, which effectively is Stuart's, Lees, Grants, and Sherman's. Again, as expected, there's nothing that shouts out which is significantly different from previous editions of Bolt Action. You still can't take a Recce Stuart without losing the turret because the Brits never used it with the turret in a Recce role, unlike the US and Soviets.
Can I just I know we said that the layout and the photos and everything's brilliant. I'd like to make a small complaint, which is that when you make it a Recce Stuart, they've put what that does in a grey box for some reason on the next page. So on page 64, you have the Recce Stuart. On page 65, underneath 3 other tanks, you have what that option means for the tank, which, as you said, you replace the turret, etc., with a Pintle HMG, and it gives it Recce and open topped. Because basically you've took the turret off and you just sat there in the ring with the HMG. And yeah, formatting wise, I think that's a really annoying choice to not put the rules where you've put all the other rules.
Yeah, I guess what they've done, because all 4 Stuart entries can be Recce's. So what they've done is put what that means at the end of all 4. And then in the unit entry, it said C over leaf or C below.
Yeah, actually, do you know what then? I think I'm with that. Actually, now that you said that, don't repeat the rule every time, although we do that elsewhere in the book, so I don't have a huge problem with that. But don't put it in one of those grey little boxes. Like, make it something really obvious. Because I mean, even the text, because it's a grey box, the text is white on it, which makes it less eye-catching. But actually, it's only one sentence, so just pop it on every entry. Anyway, that's enough griping about formatting. My big question: can I take a Dakar Stuart?
You can take the M3 Stuart 1 and M3 Stuart 2. So turret-mounted light AT gun with coax MMG and 2 forward-facing hull-mounted MMGs.
So kind of.
Kind of Dakar. Dakar enough. As Dakar as you're going to get.
Yeah, 3 MMGs. So
Yeah.
not bad.
Yeah. So you got your Grants and your Lees. You've got all the different permutations. So depending upon whether or not you want some limitations in terms of like easily catches fire or vulnerable, whether or not you want the extra MMG coupler and so on. All of those different permutations are there. I like the Lee. I've always liked the Lee. Not a biggest fan of the Grant purely because I think having that extra couple of MMGs pretty useful. We know the Grant's coming out soon as a plastic kit, so you'll be able to build both the Lee and the Grant. So I think, we already see them, a fair amount, but having them in plastic rather than resin may well see them even more.
Yeah, and with us playing Tank Wars at the minute, rather than bringing twice as many tanks, you could just bring twice as many anti-tank guns by bringing a Lee or a Grant, couldn't you? So
Yeah.
that's why I quite like them. Alongside the fact that they're really interesting looking. When the Sherman has become the classic World War II tank, I would say Shermans and Tigers. And so when you've got this weird, sort of similar but very different tank, it's a really nice addition to your army, I think.
Yeah, I've recently got the Lee plastic kit, so I will be adding that to my Burma army and then waiting for the Commonwealth book to come out to really flesh out my Burma army.
And then we have what I just described as sort of the classic World War II tank, which is we have the Shermans in many flavors. I think slightly fewer flavors than the Americans, but you're not really going to notice it, I don't think.
Yeah, every Sherman you could possibly want in terms of, is it 75 mil, is it 76 mil, which will, determine whether or not it's medium or heavy. Is it a Howitzer version? Is it a Firefly? Is it a DD? Yeah.
But that was the only things I would highlight with the Shermans is you lose the big old jumbo boy, but you gain the big gun in the Firefly. So it's a bit of a fair trade, I think. And only 210 points for the Firefly, which, comparing it to the Comet earlier, it's 48 points cheaper for a super heavy gun, again with the 1-inch template rule.
Yeah.
The one of the Sherman, having said I was only going to highlight two, the DD Sherman, because he's amphibious, your Royal Marine Commandos can bring him on the table without the -1. So on a D-Day game, that is actually quite a significant little thing. I think that'll be really fun.
Yes, yeah. Take you to Royal Navy subsection, have them on the beach rallying. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Final two, you got your M22 Locust and your M24 Chaffee. So these are very late war ones. The Locust is actually, I really like it. It basically replaced the Tetrarch. 115 points. You're going to take it with Recce, so 125 points. You're going to get a turret mounted light AT with coax MMG, forward facing MMG. It is only 7+, but buzzing around with Recce, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Do you know what? Having said I love the Tetrarch, I think I have a new little favorite there. He's a nice looking tank and great rules.
Yeah. Half a dozen were used in Operation Varsity in 1945. So if you want to do the British version of the paper panzers, this is, slightly less papery, but still pretty much limited in use. Final one is the Chaffee. Chaffee's great. It's the other fast vehicle that the Brits get, 8+ rather than 9+. Give it the Recce, so 180 points. You're getting a medium AT gun, coax MMG, hole mounted MMG, 8+ Recce, fast and Recce. What a great combo.
Yeah. And my only complaint here, which is minor, I will accept, but US, you get the gyro. So if you were going to go veteran, you've lost your gyro there, I believe. And so the reason I have a little bit of a gripe is I would have quite liked a few points off for that gyro. But
is it the same cost, is it?
It is, yeah. The US version is 170 regular, 204 veteran. So
that's interesting.
So we haven't costed the gyro, which makes it a bit of a national characteristic, which it always was, I guess. Right, Phil. Now, I think at this point in the podcast, we know each other's tastes in anti-tank weapons. And I think this next one might be the anti-tank weapon for you, the cheeky little two-pounder on a porty.
Yeah, 70 points, light AT gun, 360 soft skin. It's very similar to the GMC, isn't it? The M3 GMC with the US that we talked about in the FAQ episode. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you're paying 5 points to take the front or rear to full 360. I don't think that's a bad price. I think if both were on the table, I might try and save the points because I've got 2 turns. But actually, it's pretty. I tell you what, it is good for actually. Like we were talking about with the rotating platforms, it gives you the opportunity to do the fire order without having to advance, and that's actually could be quite significant in an important point in the game. So, actually, I'm going to say that it's worth the 5 points every time now.
Cool. You've got, moving down the tank destroyers list, you've got your £6 Porty, your Deacon, your Archer £17. Archer's interesting. So 198 points regular, 9+ medium tank, rear facing super heavy anti-tank gun, and a crew carried LMG, which means it's either or when you fire it. I mean, it's an expensive thing. It's rear facing, but it is 9+. It's also a cool little tank as well,
I'm
the
really
Archer.
irked here because we're never going to see the Archer. Like, I printed an Archer back in the day, loved it. I want to run an Archer. I was really hoping for some sort of shoot and scoot mechanic with it because the whole point of putting your gun backwards is to allow you to escape quicker. I actually think, having said that, I think the main reason was so it fit on the actual chassis. But the added benefit is you can run away quickly. And so it would have been nice for it to have something. Maybe it's like it could even have had recce, to be fair. Like, because if you're being shot at, driving forward is
Mm.
an easy escape. It doesn't help that it's got crew carried small arms as well. I think that's just another nail in the coffin. I'd love to see a platoon of them someday, though.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, they weren't very prevalent. 665 manufactured, so it wasn't like they were a big deal in real life.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where I think across the whole war, you're unlikely to see one necessarily. But particular engagements, it'll be the armored fighting vehicle of that engagement. And so it's a bit like the Puma, isn't it? Where like, what was the 300, I think, Pumas? And so if you just dropped someone randomly in the war, the odds are they're not going to see one. But if they're in a specific engagement where they were deployed,
Yeah,
they're going to be there all day.
yeah. In terms of the other ones, yeah, you've got your half track based ones, so sort of M3 half track based ones, your Wolverine and your Achilles. Yeah, they're. I don't think there's anything like particularly jumping out with them.
No, not really for me either. Other than the fact that we're seeing the 17-pounder coming up again with the
Yeah,
Achilles. Self-propelled artillery? Anything catching your eye in that?
I do like the Priest or the Sexton, either or.
I
Um,
love the look of them. That's what I
yeah,
love, especially spoilers when we get to kangaroos. Pair them with a kangaroo, and you can have a full platoon of, well, a full army of the same thing,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, I don't think they're worth it because of the ranges to indirect fire with howitzers now. But yeah, I do like a priest. I've painted one up and used it a lot in V2. It will appear at some point.
Yeah, I think the HMG helps,
Yes.
but I think the other hindrance as well is because he's open topped and there's so much field craft on the table, and also just like rifle fire MMGs. Like open topped is quite the liability. Even in V2 is quite the liability. And
Yeah.
so more fieldcraft means you're likely to lose that to infantry.
Yeah. And then your AA vehicles, you got your Bofors truck, and your Polston AA truck. So these are both soft skins with one's got a heavy, one's got a light. It's a shame. I used to like the Bofors truck. It's a shame that they're soft skin now, damaging on sixes. Also, they've got the stationary firing platform rule, so you can only fire on a fire order, so they're really vulnerable now.
Yeah, that's the thing for me. It's not the fact that the soft skins change, because that's something that you just sort of factor in as a risk of taking them. But the stationary firing platform really just makes them not worth including because, as you say, you can't advance them on for one good round of shooting. You leave them there, you're likely to lose them. And so I just don't see them hitting the table really, especially when now it is twice the price, but you can have autocannons on armor.
Yeah. Speaking of which, so we've got the Crusader AA. It's worth just people who play Brits or have played against Brits in V3 will have seen these a lot. They are appearing, a lot so far. What's worth just noting is that both options, both the turret-mounted heavy autocannon, the Mark II, and the Mark One, and the light autocannon version are both open-topped. Whereas in the main rulebook, the turret-mounted heavy autocannon was open-topped, but the light version was not open-topped.
Yeah, I think that might mean we're not going to see them very often now.
Yeah, yeah, and they are late war for all of those that have painted them up in early war desert colors or mid war. They are only late war.
um, can I interest you in that case in a Staghound, which is still open topped, but it's got HMGs instead of autocannons?
Yeah, Stackhound. So this was in V2. You didn't see it a huge amount. If you did see a Stackhound, you didn't see the AA version. You saw the one with the medium AT gun, which we'll get onto later. No, not for 125 points. No.
Yeah, he's a bit steep, isn't he?
Yeah.
That was my thinking as well. I thought he's very cool because he's got 2 and a whole MMG. But yeah, 125 points is a bit steep. But I think we've saved the very best to last, which is our old friend, the
The
armadillo.
armadillo. Yeah. So what is it? 40 points regular for a pintle-mounted LMG 7 plus. May add a rear-facing heavy autocannon for plus 40. So 80 points gets you a rear-facing heavy autocannon, a pintle LMG with flak, open-topped, and stationary firing platform. No, no.
You see, I think if you were looking at this, for me, what this does is the Bofors truck, 55 points. You're paying an extra, what's that? The 25 points.
25, yeah.
You're getting an extra gun and the armor. This, if you were thinking about going truck AA, you're going to go armadillo. Now, I think you're right. I think stationary firing platform has done this one in. I think back in the day, these were popular because you could advance them. So we're not going to see them in huge numbers, but when we do, it will always make me smile because it's such a ridiculous little vehicle.
Yeah. So we're just moving on to the final sort of bit of, offensive vehicles before we get to transport. So armored cars. You've got your Rolls Royce, your Lanchester, and your Marlin Harrington, which are your basic 7 plus MMG vehicles, which have recce. I used to like the Marlin Harrington. That was quite cool to take.
Yeah, because that's the 2 MMGs, isn't it? And so yeah, that was always quite a nice one. I Rolls Royce though, Phil. Get yourself a lady on the bonnet, yeah?
Yeah, true. Your favorite, the early war motorcycle and sidecar, which does have the extra selection rule, so you can take up to 3 as one selection in each armored platoon.
And we need to stop here, I think, because off the back of our FAQ episode, where they've added confusion here, because this wording is the same as the lunge mines. And so I have always read that as one selection, you can have 3 motorcycles. But the way this was ruled in the FAQ was you can only take 3 in one of your slots, not in each slot.
Yeah.
Which means
I would read that as saying you can take 15 motorcycles in one platoon.
And I think that's what it says, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think your reading is correct. But based on the lunge mine one, we either need to revisit the lunge mines or we need to add an FAQ for this. Otherwise, you've got the exact same words meaning 2 different things.
Yeah.
But what I do like is it can have the AT rifle on it.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing because that fast vehicle whizzing down the road, shooting you in the side with an AT rifle, +1 pen for point blank, +1 for your side. That 2+ pen weapon is very dangerous.
And moving on to slightly more armored, you've got your Humber. I love the Humber. I've said this before. I prefer the light the light AT gun version. So this is going to cost you 115 points for a turret-mounted light AT gun with a coaxial MG 7 plus armored car with recce. You can take it with a light autocannon as well. But yeah, I love the Humber.
Oh, what about a Fox? 85 points with an HMG instead?
I mean, no.
Oh.
No.
I mean, it's just, do you know what the problem is? Just slightly too high. I think if that was 75, I could have tempted you.
Yeah. The Daimler, that's pretty cool. Light AT, coax, 7 plus armor car. It's it's just a different version of the Humber.
Same points and everything, isn't it?
Same points and everything. Yeah, it's the same as the Panhard and so on. The Humber Light Recce, the Humberette. No, turret-mounted LMG. Yes, you can upgrade it to give it a forward-facing hull, but no, let's just move on from that one.
You could have 2 LMGs with 2 pins for 65 points, armor 7. So, like, if you just want a pin machine, it's all right. And also, like, 70 points with an AT rifle, so you can pin 1 squad of troops, pin a tank. It's there for the pins, I'd say that one. It's a cheap pin putter outer.
Yeah. Then you've got things like your Morris, different versions of the Morris, your Daimler Dingo, your Humber Scout Car. I'm skipping through these because they are cool and themey and they have a place. But
Yeah, the one note on the Morris Light is what I just said about the pin machine. -5 points because you don't have flak. 65 points. Same shenanigan. AT LMG. That's probably the one I'd go for because you don't need the flak.
now the AEC heavy armored car. This I am going to pause on. So this is 135 points for a turret-mounted light anti-tank gun with coax MGs, 8+ with recce. I would upgrade it to give it a medium anti-tank gun. So for 155 points, you are getting a medium AT gun in a turret, coax MG, 8+ recce. I think that's pretty good as a tank hunter with that medium anti-tank gun.
Yeah, he's in the sweet spot points-wise, isn't he? I'm not super convinced. Like, I'm not going out and buying one now. But I could, if someone brought that, I could totally understand that, like, they've made a good choice.
Yeah. Your Staghound Mark 1 is there, so that's very similar to what I just said, but it's a light AT. Your Greyhound, M8 Greyhound, they I didn't, to be honest, I didn't realize how much they were in use by the Brits, but yeah, you got your Greyhound if you want it.
Did you skip the beaverette there?
I did, yeah.
Bit rude. I mean, nothing to write home about. LMG, open topped, but he is only 40 points. So,
yeah,
what he lacks in output, he also lacks in points.
Yeah. So the next four are, I think these are worth talking about. So you've got your LRDG armed trucks, your North Africa SAS Jeep, and your Europe SAS Jeep, and your British Airborne Recce Jeep. So all of these are soft skin. All of them have recce. Now we used to see the British Airborne Recce Jeep quite a lot in V2. What I always found interesting was that the original entry for it allowed you to take it as regular, but it's an airborne Jeep. Surely it's going to be veteran. At least they fixed that now. So for 42 points with the extra Vickers K, so it's going to cost you 52 points with the extra. You're getting the recce. It's just the fact that they're soft skin and soft skins die on the sixes rather than moving on to the damage table. But I do think they're pretty cool, in terms of putting out what you're firing, 5 shots with a Vickers K. So you're putting out 6, half that to 2.5, round up to 3, 2 of them. So six shots, 2 pins. Oh no, on the same map, sorry, 6 shots, 1 pin. That's worth looking at. It's
yeah,
the SAS.
and then the SAS Jeep in Europe was my counter to your it's a soft skin, which I think it's the logical choice if you're not doing airborne theme.
Yeah, so the SAS in Europe, you get the frontal armor plating, so it counts as basically it can't be damaged by small arms, but can take pins if you're shot at from the front. That's better. That's giving you that little bit more survivability.
Yeah, but he's so pricey, isn't he? 90 points. I mean, he's got a ton of guns, which is a positive, but I think he's a liability. I'm not investing 90 points in a soft skin. I think it's getting a bit rich.
Yeah, so you're probably not going to then necessarily agree with either the LRTG gunned up truck.
I'm more interested because it's less points.
Yeah,
so
but as soon
I'm
as
more
you
likely to be
start,
tempted.
but as soon as you start adding in things like the light autocannon, for example,
But it's discretion.
Yeah.
You got to use your discretion. Don't be going out and getting greedy with your guns. Like, how many guns do you actually need, boys? That's what we need to be thinking here.
Well, lots if you were the LRDG or the SAS, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I love these models. I love the sort of principle of them. I don't think they're as good in V3 because of the change to soft skins and damage. That's a shame, but they do look really cool.
Yeah, and then the one thing before we leave the trucks in the desert that I'd like to highlight is deflate the tires.
Yeah.
So the North Africa SAS Jeep, deflate those tires. SAS Jeeps may advance through areas of difficult ground. Now, we've had this conversation before about difficult ground not being a thing to start with. So that means nothing. What they actually probably mean is rough ground. But then to add an even additional little taste of confusion, it's difficult ground classed as sandy, rocky, or anything similar. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I might have missed it, but I don't believe in the bolt action rulebook there is a section for classifying what the ground is. Like, we just have a section for rough ground. We don't have rough ground, difficult ground as a subcategory of rough ground, and then sandy, rocky, etc. It's one of those classic agree with your opponent rules, basically, is what this is leading to, but it doesn't state that explicitly, which,
Yeah, there might be something in the optional rules at the back when you've got different terrain types and different weather conditions and so on. There may well be something there about sand dunes and driving over sand and so on. But certainly, if you were at an event or you were playing a pickup game at the club with someone you hadn't met before, you rock up with your North Africa SAS Jeep. There's then absolutely is that conversation. Well, this is rocky, this is sandy, but this is rubble, and just making sure it's clear before you get going.
well, I'd say rubble is pretty rocky.
Yeah, but it's
And
not
I'd
rocky.
also say like a forest, like it's probably going to help you through the forest as well, because if the problem driving through the forest is the mud. And so I think just say rough ground. People are paying so many points for these. I'm not going to be upset if we just make it rough ground, full stop. And then there's no need to like worry about it at all.
Yeah,
But
see, I probably would get upset if you tried to drive your deflated, tired North Africa SAS Jeep through a Stalingrad pile of rubble.
yeah, I don't know. You've paid, I mean, from a games mechanics perspective, you've paid the points for it. And so I don't mind. Like, you've paid the points. That's the nature of the beast. But I do think if it's giving you advantages for rocks, it's giving you advantages for rubble. And so I do think that actually, even from a world mechanics perspective, I'm not too upset by it. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
because also you're not going to find it. The if I'm going to get upset about that, I'm going to get upset about the fact you brought a North African Jeep to Stalingrad.
Well, true. Yeah. Yeah. Fair play. Okay. The last two armored cars versions is go the Recce carrier, so the universal carrier with an LMG of Recce. You can upgrade it to have a pintle. You can also have the light AT gun. Sorry, AT rifle. Sorry, and the Wasp, which is the universal carrier with a flamethrower.
Which is an absolute favorite. I love the Wasp. He's so cheap now as well, by the way, 75 points for a Wasp. So all you get for that is a flamethrower on a 7+ open topped. So it's a liability, admittedly.
And it's an
Um,
infantry flamethrower as well, rather than a vehicle flamethrower. So it's short and range and
yep,
hits.
absolutely. So it's short and range, less hits. And so, but I'm happy because it's 75 points. Now, pay an extra 10, give it an LMG. Definitely do that because you want the extra pin and you're going to run out of fuel at some point. Before we do leave the Wasp behind, I would like to say that a platoon of Wasps, now that you can do it in a normal tournament game, now it's not going to be very competitive. So people shouldn't get upset about the fact you got 4 flamethrower vehicles coming at you because it's probably a waste of points because of the 6-inch range. But it would be phenomenal to see, especially because you don't get the advance down the road at double speed because it's tracked. But I'd love to see it all the same. What a load of
Yeah,
fun.
they're very low. You can hide them behind walls and so on. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so the final section. So transports and tows. Everything you could imagine is there. Jeeps, brain carriers, trucks. Every flavor of trucks, utility cars, tractors, lend lease half tracks, scout cars, and so on. The ones I just want to flag up, you mentioned them earlier, Johnny. It's the kangaroos, so the Stuart, the Priest, and the Sherman and Ram kangaroo. So if you want to stick a load of guys in, excuse me, in armored transports, you can do. Stick them in a recce platoon and give them recce, even more survivable and amusing as well.
Yeah, the Stewart is so cheap. Sort of 39 points. The Kangaroo, that was always my favorite because you get 11 men transport and it's armor 8. The Stuart weirdly is only armor 7. But yeah, the Priest Kangaroo, 66 plus 5 for an LMG. I'm not paying 30 points for an HMG. I think that's too much, 96 points for the transport. Can we talk about buffaloes?
Yes, please do.
Love a buffalo. Now, the old school buffalo, I used to be able to put my brain in that bad boy.
Yeah, so this is so now it's only 24 men rather than or a jeep or an artillery piece or a universal carrier. Yeah. So no more Russian doll tactics.
Yeah, which is a sad day to be honest, because it was a lot of fun. It wasn't very effective. Now, some people did get very upset about the Russian doll mechanic,
They did.
but actually, it really was not competitive. It was a real waste of points because you've put sort of like 250, 300 points into this stupid little one tactic that can be interrupted at any moment. But yeah, I just think that's a shame. Even if you'd got rid of the Bren option and just let me put a Jeep in there, I would have been at least half happy. But he's good though. Armor 7, 24 men, 94 points. You've got two MMGs already at 94 points. I think I'm going to pay the 20 points to make them HMGs, you know.
Yeah, so when I've taken buffaloes with the US, I have definitely upgraded the MMGs to HMGs in order to put the pins out because they're independent as well. So that's two armored vehicles you can pin, assuming you hit per turn. Yeah.
What I'm not going to do though is pay the 35 points for the autocannon, I think.
I think if I was going super themey, doing late war crossing of the Rhine, Shelled Estuary, absolutely. But I know Bo used to talk about it, didn't he, in V2, where he'd give the light autocannon or put the light autocannon on his buffalo. Less so now. Yeah.
There is a place actually for it. Let's say someone had written a pack for a team tournament where you could only take so many armored platoons across the 3-man team, and you wanted an additional armored platoon. What you could do is in your recce platoon, you could take like 3 buffaloes with autocannons instead of taking like the cruiser A's. And so there is a place for it, should that be the case. On that note,
Yeah.
Phil, how are ticket sales for the Tommy's team tournament?
T5 fully sold out, yeah. With the said restriction, yeah. If you were trying to get some decent amount of armor and shots, but someone had denied you the access to an armor platoon, the Buffalo is definitely worth looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Then weirdly, if I may jump on, Terrapin amphibious truck.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's like a duck, except you can't have weapons. Sad. I'm not going to take it. But then we've got the mule back, which I think will probably upset a few people. But I do see why we're having a mule because I assume the Chindits were probably using mules, etc., etc., etc. I wonder if the move was to make the mule different in some way. Like maybe get rid of the stubborn rule and just make him more expensive because he is a bit of a joke in how cheap he is for an order dice.
So what they did do, we talked about this in our very first V3 episode. They have specified that any tow that you take must be capable of towing the artillery piece it is attached to, in inverted commas. So you can't do the cheesy thing now, taking a medium or a heavy,
a 17-pounder towed by a mule.
You can't take your airborne platoon, with your 17-pounder artillery piece with a mule. Okay, so they have slightly kind of made it a little bit more realistic. Yeah, I mean they were used all over the place. They were used in Monte Cassino. They were used Mountain of Strange. They were used in the jungle, and etc. So I'm glad it's there. I'm genuinely surprised it wasn't in the main rulebook as a common transport vehicle, if I'm honest. But it is there. So yeah,
and you can use them to tow your land mattress. So I think we will see a lot of. I'm going to use the word cheesy lists with land mattresses being towed by mules. Moving forward, though, we've got a command vehicle in the transport section, which is a rarity. You can't take it as your commander in a vehicle platoon, though, can you? Because it's a transport.
Because it's a transport vehicle. So it comes under the category of a transport vehicle, which has the command vehicle special rule. If it was a armored vehicle that happened to have transport capacity, such as a Stummel, you can take that in the armored platoon, but you can't go the other way around. Yeah.
And then the two things that I'm liking that have made it into the army books are the landing crafts. So we've got the assault and the mechanized. I just like it because it means that when you do that D-Day assault mission like we did at the start of this month. Shout out Pegasus. You can do the rules from the army book rather than having to go to another book, which is quite a nice little touch.
Yeah, and then your last two, you've basically got field ambulances. You've got a 6+ soft skin version and a 7+ M5 half track version.
Yeah, which is standard. Nothing to really. I never see anyone run an ambulance, if I'm brutally honest. I don't think I've ever seen an ambulance used in a game. I've seen people paint them up because it's quite a nice little model to paint up, but sadly never in a game. But equally, I don't see many medics these days either. So,
yeah.
Now, Can I give a notable absence shout out?
You may, yep.
OPs. So in Canadian D-Day, I think it was the D-Day Canadian sector book,
Mhm.
we started to get the transports that were observation posts. So you could put your observer in it, and then
Yeah.
you could look out, issue your fire order from inside. It was a really unique and nice mechanic that also wasn't super overpowered because you had to put your vehicle in line of sight. And so you're risking losing the vehicle and the man inside, but it gives them that extra protection against small arms fire. I wish we'd kept them. I wish we'd ported them over because that is such a cool little thing to add.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I never used them myself, but they were a nice little addition. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the only other thing that's missing, which I think is actually a V3 missing, was when we started to get those artillery officers for your artillery platoons. I'm still hoping that one day they return where basically the squad mates in the officers' squad can recruit the guns because they're all artillery officers, basically.
Mm.
And I'm hoping that does make a return someday. I just don't know when. Um, that's all of the new rules, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, that's a lot to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, there's At the end of the book, just to summarize, we've got like our standard selection guide with some sample armies and your early, mid, late selectors. I'm not seeing a lot of people using them much, to be honest. Like, I think they're a nice reference, but what do you think of the book overall, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's good. I robust is the word I was thinking of earlier today when I was looking at it. I think it's got everything you want. I'm not walking away from it, mourning the absence of things. I think if I was playing, if I didn't own a British Army and I picked up the GB book, would I go and buy a British Army? Probably would. They're in a strong place. I'd probably pick up either the brand new Winter British box set or the British and Canadian box set. I'd look at the guards. I'm a fan of flamethrowers. I'd look at engineers. I like the Cromwell, the Chaffee. I think there's some really good options here. Um, I personally am going to be playing Airborne using this book, so I'm going to be fully leaning into the Airborne, and I'm going to wait for the Commonwealth so that I can get my Burma army back off the shelf and introduce some of the new units stuff from the Commonwealth. But I think it's a good, solid book. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. It's not earth shattering, like it hasn't blown me away. It's like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. But true to form, the Brits are in a strong spot in bolt action. And I think they've got a lot of very good defensive rules as well as offensive rules. They're not lacking for anything. There's not a lot I can think of that other armies have, especially now that like Fausts are bad. Like the one thing the Germans always had over the Brits was the Fausts. They're so expensive now that actually I'm not missing them. And I think my only gripes with the book are the lack of like the nice little things like the OP transports and Pearson squads, like those nice little flavor touches that are more missed opportunities than they are like gaping omissions, I would say. And so it's good. I think like you, I could be tempted to play Brits off the back of it. I think if I bought in and I bought like some British models and before I'd learned the rules and then I found out these are my rules, I'd be quite happy with it. I wouldn't be upset at all. I'm not sure it's how I play the game because it, I haven't seen a unique way in for the speed outside of the desert, but then you've got those expensive soft skins. So I'm not sure it's for me yet, but you're
Yeah.
right. I don't think anyone's going to be disappointed.
No, I don't think you would be at all. The two things that they don't have, there's no cavalry unit. Now the Brits, to be fair, only had access to that via Duel in the Sun. So going right back to that V1 theatre book, Duel in the Sun, there was that option to add camels, and you don't get scouts, so you don't get the equivalent of the Sparta or the Soviet scouts, for example. But again, that wasn't particularly, how the Brits were using, their units in that sense. Those are really, I think, the only two admissions where, if I was looking at, do I want to play Germans or US with cavalry. Okay, well, I can't do that in terms of Brits. Do I want to play scouts? Well, I've got Soviets, I've got the Germans currently with scouts, etc. So
I also don't think not having infiltrating squads is a huge problem because there's enough minor nations that if you're thinking about this from a competitive perspective, for example,
shut down your
yeah, they
infiltration.
stop you using infiltrate. And so if you've lent into that, you lose all that advantage of infiltration. And so I don't think that's a huge loss for me. I'm not going to miss that in the Brits. The one thing that I can't spot is the India pattern transport.
It will, I'm led to believe, appear in the Commonwealth book. So
Uh
things like that. So yeah, the Indian passenger carrier, both as a transport and as a armored car, very much was part of the Indian Army and the Brits using it in Burma and the Far East and so on. So I would imagine / led to believe that it's going to be in the
well,
Commonwealth book.
the thing that like the reason it seemed a real like big absence is because we did have the India pattern tanks, which is what made me think of it. So we had the Mark II India pattern, and so that's why I was thinking, oh, we don't have the India pattern carrier, and so and I love that because it's basically a Bren on wheels.
Yeah, it's another reason why I'm going to wait until the Commonwealth because I've got 2 or 3 of those of the carriers and I'm like I can't use them at the moment, but I'll wait until next year and bring them out then.
Yeah, so subscribe. Phil finally get to play his army.
Yeah. From somebody who played, Brits competitively, top level, all the time in V2, they haven't got any love from me so far. But the airborne will, in V3. So okay, so there we go. Armies of GB, third book so far that's come out. Let us know what you think about it in the comments. We like it. I think it's a robust. I'm going to go with that word. Robust. It's good. If you do want to order it, please do consider using our affiliate links, which will be in the description. And we will be back with some guests coming up in the next few episodes. And I guess the next time we'll really be back will be when Soviets come out.
Yeah, I'm going to go with solid. It's a solid book. I'm not inspired, but I am looking forward to the direction that we're going with the future books. So get yourself subscribed.
Thank you for listening. Bit of a long one. Well done for getting through to the end. Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.